Welcome, everyone, to the 25th episode of Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. I'm your host, Erik Roth, shamanic astrologer. Before I get into today's episode, I'd like to share about give you an update. I'm in the process of doing a few travels coming up here, and the big one is coming up in mid-October to late October. And I will be in California and Arizona, including Southern California, Central Valley, and the Tucson area, as well as planning a basic astrology class with a colleague in Willow Creek, California, up there in the northern part of the state, just to the east of Eureka. So if you're interested, certainly you're welcome to contact me. Feel free to do that. And if you would like to meet with me in person for a reading while I'm in one of those areas, feel free to reach out and maybe we may be able to coordinate. I do have some openings still available towards the the third and fourth weeks of October, and then also a little bit into the early part of November as well. There's part of my journey is to take me through the Central Valley of California, where there's a Turlock Expo taking place, the Psychic and Holistic Fair, and I'll be having a table there on October 30th of this year. So without further ado, we're going to get into the big topic for today and really get into what October has to offer, not all of the things that are going on. This is just a specific area we're going to share about. And so just a moment, I'll get that up on the screen for you. Okay, so we are going to be looking at the direction changes of some upcoming planets. Mercury is currently retrograde, and it's a really big highlight, not only this end of September 2021, but going into the first almost 3 weeks of October. Then we have Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto also all changing direction, going direct in the month of October. And it's pretty astounding. They're all going to be going direct, all 4 planets, within about 11 to 12 days of each other. And so that's pretty remarkable and very, very rare and unusual. So I'm looking forward to sharing more about this. If you if you like this video, please share that with me. Mark that on the video. And if you want to subscribe for further updates, please do so. This helps me create more videos by doing that, and to show which ones that are more not just popular, but things that are really things you want to tune into yourself, learn more about. I'm happy to share more about that in future videos as well, as I develop this channel more and more going into the future, especially after my big road trip in October. Okay, so what do we have today? So what we're going to do is we're going to do an acknowledgement and invocation. Just a sharing and a thanking of all the stars and the planets and the elements and all our relations and all of creation. We're a part of this cosmic creation, and we thanking for their breath of creation, their love, their wisdom, knowledge, and blessings and guidance during our journey in this life. And in this time, certainly with these particular planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, and Mercury, all shifting directions here, with Mercury doing it twice in a short span of time. We want to honor that and acknowledge what the offerings are for us to learn at this time with these 4 planets and the stars that are around them, which also have another sharing around that with each planet that changes direction. So we'll get to connect into that for ourselves. And also, one of the things about this is the element of water, and I would say air too, but water in particular, because of where Jupiter and Saturn are, with Jupiter in particular at the tail of the goatfish and the water streaming down from the water bear above and to the right of that particular planet. And so this is embodiment of the transition we're all experiencing, and the reminder and symbolically of us being able to adapt to the changes in our environment, to connect into it for the, for our own betterment and for the community's betterment. So this water is an element that's definitely on the horizon for an even greater level of activity going into the next year or two here, with Jupiter moving into Pisces at the end of this year, and Saturn not far away from going into Pisces as well the following year in 2023. So we're on the cusp of something big around that. Okay, so the highlights, of course, I've just outlined them with Jupiter, Mercury, Pluto, and Saturn all stationing direct, and then also a recap of Mercury going retrograde, which I talked a bit about in the last video, which was to highlight the month of September. There will be another video, episode 26, which will also bring out some additional insights about the month of October that won't be created until, maybe another 10 days or so before I get that one up. And so we'll probably focus on the second half of October with some additional insights and things to share about that, beyond just the stations direct and retrograde. Okay, so we want to first start in early October. This is the first change of direction. This is Pluto. And we can see Pluto's not visible to the naked eye, but I've got it marked on the night sky picture here. And it sits between the Archer and the Goldfish. It's closer to the Archer than the Goldfish, but it sits kind of at the edge of that Archer constellation. So it's going to be, right now, it's just over 24 degrees Capricorn when it stations direct. And the entire month of October, it's going to be spending basically there. It is barely going to move less. I think it's less than a quarter of a degree all told. So it barely moves. And so there's kind of an emphasis into this part of the sky and this area of that. But it's also part of this evolvement here, especially in the United States. We're in a Pluto return cycle. And there was a presentation that was given at the Conscious Life Expo in LA that I shared about it, but there was another presenter that also shared a lot about that too on the astrology panel. And this Pluto return is definitely rocky, and with 2022 being the sort of the center point of this Pluto return. And so we're kind of building up into that space right there here in the US. So what does this all mean here? So 24 degrees, 18 minutes is the degree and the longitudinal degree of where Pluto stations direct. And at the border, of course, of the Archer constellation. This is only about 2 degrees from where it's stationed direct in 2020. And in 2 years from now, it'll only, next year, it'll only be 2 more degrees deeper into Capricorn. So Pluto is a planet, is a dwarf planet. It's slowing down, and it's giving us additional opportunities for greater insights into the sign of Capricorn, and around structure, around death, rebirth of this structure and systems. This dwarf planet represents the underworld, bringing us continued knowledge of what was once unknown and buried in our unconscious self or our psyche. This is where the treasures of the psyche can be found, and where we must face our deepest fears. So the underworld is really a vital place to experience for healthy growth on our soul's path in order to live authentic lives. And in order to get those treasures, in order to really take advantage of it, it's a process of surrender. It's not that we give up in life in general, but when it comes to our own individual evolution and on a human collective level, that evolution as well, surrendering to what could become the flowering of humanity, and in here in the United States, which is, there's a potential for that in the years to come, not right away. This is something that is going to take, another few years to really get through this particular period of time, which I'll talk about and continue to talk about in future videos. So the US Pluto return, I've calculated it as 2020 through 2024. I go into a lot of this in the video that I did about 2020 into 2021, and another video just about 2021. I talk a lot about the Pluto return as part of this, and I will also bring it up in December when I create the 2022 year looking ahead. So we're going to look at that. This is we're in a time of composting. That means systems and structures, economic, health, social, they're all going rebirthing. And the fears, especially here in the United States, is how this country was originally founded. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence are seeding of this country from the Europeans and the Native Americans that were here, and the importation of slavery into the US. All of that, there is a lot to reconcile. There's a lot to face. These are very deep and profound truths that, on the mainstream tends to gloss over. Not this that they don't acknowledge it, there's certainly an acknowledgement of it, but there's a lot more here underneath that needs to be brought forth into a greater level. And there's a lot of people that are afraid of this truth. There's a lot of people that are running away from it and trying to continue to gloss over it even more so. And that resistance is intended to lose steam. And the more that there's resistance, the more dramatic events that could take place. So if we can come together and cooperate and connect and have actual dialogue with one another, real dialogue, not pointing fingers, but real dialogue with each other, and also owning up to the responsibility that we all have of creating a more sustainable place to live, not just with our brothers and sisters, but with the earth itself. This will help plant the seeds of transformation and healing as well. I like to call this the storm before the calm. Now, the 2020s in general is a profound storm. It really got off to a really rocky start to the 2020s in the actual year 2020. And that's going to continue in different incarnations as we go through into the later into the mid 2020s and beyond. Okay, so let's take a look at Saturn. Saturn stations direct only 4 days after Pluto does. And every time these planets station direct or station retrograde, it creates an emphasis point, and where there can be a greater level of intensity felt around these planets. And whatever methodology and qualities they bring forth for us to take advantage of in our lives, there's an intensification of that when it's stationing direct and when it's stationing retrograde. Now, after the direct period, or after the station direct, with these planets, there tends to be a literal forward momentum happening. With the outer planets, it tends to go a little bit slower. So even after it stations direct on October 10th, it could take a few weeks for Saturn to really get rolling, and probably not until November when there could be maybe some greater level improvement. And I don't associate necessarily just generally retrograde bad and direct good. They all have their place, their role to play. And retrograde is more of helps us review and see back where we were and what we were doing with that particular archetypal energy, the opportunities that were available to us. And in a direct motion, it's more like, okay, we've done our reviews, we're now ready to apply it and to take a step or two forward here. And it's up to us through our free will to choose what that direction is going to be. Like this isn't necessarily saying, oh, this is going to be the same as in the the middle, early to mid part of the year, which was say when all planets were direct, March and April and May. Most planets were direct in May until Saturn started going retrograde later on. Pluto went retrograde, I think, also in May. There was a kind of a cluster, just like there is now with the planets going direct. And the Pluto might have been in actually April. So with that said, we're coming back into a place where we're going to get a lot of planets starting to go direct this here in the Northern Hemisphere this fall, and in the Southern Hemisphere in their springtime. So we'll keep taking a look at that as we go in deeper into videos. Okay, so Saturn going direct goes direct at 6 degrees 52 minutes, the head of the sea goat. The station point balances out Jupiter's position by assisting us in grasping the reality of how and where we stand for ourselves and our investments into our soul's path. So looking at our investments, meaning an investment in ourselves, not just, I mean, certainly there's a financial aspect of it, but it's more like an investment into the future, you know, in structures of community and our evolution, and how practical new ideas can shape that long-term future. So it's applying real world things into what we're moving into the future. Certainly everything on some level has a spiritual aspect to it. But in Saturn's case, it's a teacher, a teaching of our own personal livelihood, our relationships, our family, our vocation, our calling in life, and as a collective, where we want to go as a community, as a nation, as a globe. So Saturn's helping us plant the seeds for that long-term future. And going direct motion means that there may be great opportunities to actually accomplish things, to get things done in a more practical way, especially when we get beyond the Mercury retrograde a period, October, in mid-October there. So I'll talk about that, or Mercury at the end of this, towards the end of this video. Okay, so one of the things that Saturn is doing, where it is in the sky, it's at the head of the goatfish, and also kind of somewhat aligned with the star Altair as well, in a different constellation just above the goatfish. This is really a profound area. It's close to where Saturn stationed retrograde last year in 2020. And so there is something here, something us to reconnect and move forward with. So instead, it was retrograding with Altair in that way. So it's like at the retrograde point and the head of the sea goat. This time, it's actually going direct into that area. So there's an impression of stability, an impression of really to be, really diligent and careful, and to promote that stableness. Now, this is not taking into account these other planetary aspects. This is just looking at what the intent of Saturn is right here. Some of the other qualities that Altair as a star, which sits at 2 degrees Aquarius, creates is that it was at one time, it had us connected to as a replacement of one of the royal stars in ancient times. It represents the head of the eagle. And in the vision of Ezekiel in the Bible actually was part of this, the firmament. Altair was part of the firmament of the pillars of heaven. So it connected us into that space. Now there's some confusion around whether this constellation and the Scorpion constellation were switched out on some level when it came to the 4 corners of the earth, represented by stars and constellations. But Altair definitely played a powerful role with that constellation of the eagle. So Altair, Ptolemy writes that Altair is said to give great imagination, strong passions, indomitable will, and dominating character, influence over others, clairvoyance, and a keen penetrating mind and ability. So this is a really potent star. If those that are born in the early degrees of Aquarius that have maybe their rising sign or their sun or even their moon, for example, at this star point, this is one of your profound personal stars that you could have for yourself and draw upon as far as your own expression out in the world. So let's take a look at where Altair is, and you can see Altair up here. It's kind of in between the circumpolar constellations and the zodiacal constellations. This is the goatfish down here. There's the water bear, and this is a picture that was taken a year ago. I think it was a year ago, and earlier this year anyway, where Saturn had moved all the way into the water bear constellation. Now it's in the tail, and I'm sorry, that was Jupiter. Saturn is here in the mid section of the goatfish, and it's already retrograded back closer to the head and shoulders of the goatfish. And you can see where Antares is and where Fomalhaut is, and all of these stars are currently visible. And if you have a nice night sky image in the evening time, this is a great time to look at all of these different constellations and get help you navigate. Because if you've got an understanding where Jupiter is and where Saturn is, then you can start to make out the other constellations as sort of pinpoint planets to as a guide or a compass. Okay, so let's look at Jupiter. This is something I just mentioned, and here's Jupiter as of September 17th. And it's basically right there right now. It's slowed down, and it's going to be in that zone all of October as well into early November. So it's not going to really move very much. The two stars that represent the tail of the goatfish or sea goat are called Deneb Algeti, Deneb meaning tail. You find that word in a lot of different star constellations with various stars. And then the other star, Nashira. And this is, again, the tail represents this transition from water to earth, or from earth to water, depending on one's perspective. It's a transitionary area, and certainly Jupiter by itself is in great transition right now. This is the last few months. It's going to be in the sign of Aquarius, in the early 20-degree range of Aquarius, 22, 23, 24-degree range of Aquarius. So it's going to be spending a lot of time in this zone. It was there back in, I believe that was March and April, before it moved into the sign of Pisces for a few months. And then below it and to the right is Fomalhaut, and to the left of that is Saturn. So you'll get, again, this is just a greater level of understanding on how to connect with these planets. Back on September 17th, there was an actual conjunction with the moon here. And there will be, again, another conjunction with the moon and Saturn and Jupiter around the mid-month time period with Jupiter and Saturn, mid-month of October. Okay, so Saturn has already just been discussed. So Jupiter stationing direct October 17th, 18th. So it sits in kind of at the late hours on the Pacific coast of North America on the 17th, and the early hours on the East Coast and in Europe and Africa and Asia as well on the 18th. So I've got listed both dates there. So Jupiter is a planet or an agent of expansion, synchronicity, in our vision quest path. Since the planet was in retrograde motion back on June 20th, that's when it retrograded about 2 degrees Pisces. We've been having this experience of kind of a contraction instead of an expansion, especially so since several other planets were also in retrograde motion. And currently right now, we have, here are the planets as of this recording and into the first week of October. We have Pluto, we have Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury, all retrograde right now. And so that's really unusual, but you can get that, you can have that happen when you get a period of time like we did in the early part of 2021 and 2020, when all planets spent a few months all direct, in totality. Sometimes it was broken up by a Mercury retrograde, but there were many, many weeks where all the planets were direct. And so this is a period where we're in right now, where most planets, except for Venus and Mars, are in a retrograde motion. So this is where it stations. There's an emphasis placed in that area of the sky. For Jupiter, it's the late degrees Aquarius and the tail of the sea goat, and a case of opening up to novelty, innovation, and the transition from rigidity and solidity of the Earth to a fluid celestial realm beyond the star veil. This is balanced by what Saturn is doing. So we can see Saturn at the head of the sea goat and Jupiter at the tail. So we got the fish part and the land part, or the goat part of the sea goat. So we've got earth and water in a state of balance here. And so until Jupiter moves in 2022, it starts to transition into the fishtail part of the sea goat. So between contraction and expansion, you've got some great balance happening, and both of them going direct later in October. This could create some, I would say, helpful energy for all of us in general, but it's up to us to take advantage of what to do with it. There will be a lot of forward momentum going into the near future here. So here's some additional information. I wrote an article about Jupiter and tail sea goat. You can find in spiralnexus.com. And Jupiter has 3 conjunctions with a star called Deneb Algedi, which is right at the tail. And it's one of the 15 magical stars or Bohemian stars. And it's a time where we can really cultivate our vision quest and our spiritual path into this transition and being able to receive the wisdom and knowledge of the cosmic waters. So between September 7th, 30th, it's within 1 degree of Deneb Algedi on October 17th. Of course, there's that station direct point. But again, in November, it's within 1 degree again of Deneb Algedi. And for the period of 96 days, from August 30th till December 3rd, Jupiter is within 2 degrees of Deneb Algedi, and as well as to a large degree also with the star Nashira, which is means the fortunate one and bringer of good tidings. This is, again, something that mythologically was connected to it. And if you go up to where Saturn is and Altair and the head of the sea goat, you know, we have some, I think, more progressive energies taking place, you know, some symbolism. And so we can take in that for ourselves and work with it in a more constructive manner, as well as expanding our own vision quest path. So here's October 17th, where Jupiter will be. You can see it didn't move very much from where the 17th was, September 17th, but the moon will be with Saturn and Jupiter, say the 14th, 15th, and to some degree the 16th of October. So those are some days to look at the moon transiting that area of the sky. All right, so let's take a look at the recent equinox. This is something that I talked about in the recent video, but this is where, you know, kind of applying to what Mercury is doing here. So the sun has already moved, you know, it's almost a week beyond the equinox now, at the time of this recording. And so Mercury, as you can see circled here, is with the star Spica. It's going to be spending a lot of time with this constellation of the Priestess and the star Spica. So there's, in fact, Mercury will stay retrograde between September 26th and October 18th. And there's 3 conjunctions with Spica: September 21, October 1, and November 1. And that's all at 24 degrees and 8 minutes of Libra. So again, I reviewed this part in the last video, so please, you're welcome to go back to that. But the thing I want to emphasize here in a retrograde period is that communication and perception are emphasized here. and working with and understanding the needs of others. So in a retrograde time, it's more about the creative levels and layers of communication, that if we're relying so much on the planning and the expectations for things to work out perfectly all the time during retrograde, there's a tendency to not, meaning that there's always going to be some things that might be missing or misunderstandings on some level, and some technological, whatever our technological devices we have for communication, there could be some hiccups in that area. But again, it's a matter of having patience and creative thought and being able to communicate during a retrograde period. All right, so Mercury going direct. This is really interesting. It's in the midst of a 2-month journey through the sign of Libra, and it will station direct about 14 degrees away from Spica at 10 degrees 07 in the sign of Libra. And then October 18th, that's only about 15 degrees from the sun, the sun by that time will be only very close to the star Spica. So there's Mercury and the sun are essentially switching positions. Mercury is orbiting now between the Earth, like at this phase of its orbit, it's between the Earth and the sun. So in other phases, when it's not seen, there's a short period where it's not seen, but there's other phases where Mercury is on the other side of the sun. So the sun then ends up being between the Earth and Mercury. But in this case, it's Mercury between the sun and the Earth. So it also joins the priestess stars Parima and Vendemiatrix, both about 10 degrees Libra. And Parima is part of the arm of the priestess holding the sacred grains of the harvest. Vendemiatrix is also about taking action related to the harvest. So it's like that other arm is there also helping to gather more grains, to put things away, to take action to honor the sacred patterning and the garden of earth and be able to harvest the land. So this connection is with, to the ancient and intimate connection with our relationship with earth. And Libra brings people together in cooperation, while the priestess coordinates and works to continue our stewardship of Gaia. Okay, so where does it station direct? We can see it right here. On September 26th, it stations direct. I'm sorry, stations retrograde here. I've got another frame for stationing direct. There's Mercury and Spica, and Mercury is technically visible in the early evening sky right now, but it'll start to disappear later in October when it moves backwards towards the sun, and the sun moves towards Mercury, and so they're going to cross paths. And Mars isn't too far away. So just a few days ago, Mars was only about 5 degrees from the sun. And here is October 18th, Mercury and Parima in the matrix, even the star Zanaya. And there's another one here that is only really visible in really dark conditions called Zavijava. Again, part of the overall priestess constellation that is connected to the harvest. And we also, if you get glimpses of this is in the early morning sky in mid-October here, you may get a glimpse of the Crow constellation, although I don't feel like a lot of this will be visible until late October, early November, depending on cloud cover, of course. So those are the 4 planets that were retrograde, that are moving into a stationing direct motion. Mercury being the last one, very, very close to when Jupiter goes direct as well. And we can see at this point, Mars is also beginning to switch over. On October 7th, Mars has an exact conjunction with the sun. And then by late November, it'll actually be visible in the early morning sky, just like Mercury is. But it'll be, again, really challenging to see Mars as well. And that'll be for another video altogether. Okay, so that concludes what I wanted to talk about today. And I do, as a shamanic astrologer, I do readings, classes, and events, and I do travel as well. And so I, in a safe way, meeting people in person to do readings. I'm also doing the Turlock Expo on October 30th in the Central Valley of California, and be available in the latter half of California, meet with people if they want a reading, and also in the Tucson, Arizona area. I have, this comes from the teachings of Daniel Giamario and the Shamanic Astrology Paradigm at shamanicastrology.com. And then Kaylin Castell and I have created a whole new webinar series at mystaralchemy.com. Please feel free to check that out. There's a lot of great information and videos there, and to learn all about the magic and alchemy of the night sky. So thank you very much for tuning into this. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to the next video. Thank you. Be well, everyone.